All right, here is your beginner intermediate painting lesson to help you get started with acrylic painting. So prior to doing the actual painting, I've gone through a few steps. First step was to find some source images, photographs, for example, either stuff you've taken or pictures on the internet that you can use for inspiration. And I also like to look at some work from other artists. So in this case, the group of 7, because I'm going to be doing a Canadian landscape painting. And then I went through a series of practice drawings where I tried out a bunch of stuff and kind of put together some ideas of where I was going. And finally, I made a pencil crayon sketch that is complete. So it has all my colors mapped out. There will be some changes to this from where I'm starting here to where the painting ends up. But at least it gives me a good idea. I've played with all the composition and stuff with pencil, moved it all around, and now I'm happy and I'm ready to go on to my good copy. So I'm gonna keep my source images, my photographs in front of me, and I'm gonna keep this sketch in front of me. I also have some paintbrushes, paper towels, and I'm gonna start with a pencil and eraser. So the first thing I would start on, I like to draw in my horizon line. So this is where the sky meets the water, or the mountains at the back in this case. Then I have a large kind of rocky outcropping here, almost like an island. It could be part of a peninsula. And this is a chance for me to kind of play with it too. So it doesn't have to be exactly the same as my sketch. It's gonna be in the same spot, it's gonna be the same style, but I can make some small changes in there. We don't ever wanna line trees up on the horizon. So it's a good idea to put a small little piece of land in there. It's not too high. And then behind that, maybe we're not gonna draw the Rocky Mountains in here, but just a little more hilly for sure. I don't want that pencil line to show up in here. So all of this will be covered by paint. So that's the first step. I've mapped everything out in here. So the first thing you want to do is draw in or paint in your lightest area. So for me, it's going to be the sun. So I'll take a little bit of yellow. And almost all my colors I'll always mix with white. So that's tip number 1. If we're mixing our colors with white, they're gonna be much more intense and interesting colors. So I'll just take some of those colors, and it looks like I've got my sun here. I don't think I'm gonna make it a perfectly round ball. It's okay if we go over the mountains. If it's too yellowy, go ahead and add another layer of white to it, for example. You want it to be as light as possible here. And in fact, near the center, it's gonna be almost white. So again, I've already built up 3 layers of paint here, 4 now, to get that tone right. So it's not ever a one and done process with acrylic painting, or rarely do you get to that level. And then I'm probably gonna take some of that yellow I had there and I'll kind of just map it in. You don't need to be, a lot of this will be gone at the end. And I like to keep a wet edge. So the outside edge of these paints, when I'm mixing this kind of yellow into this white area, is going to be wet all the time. I'm not gonna let it dry. I'm mixing, you can't see it, it's off camera, but I'm mixing or dipping my paintbrush into the water all the time. It's always wet, and maybe you can see that little gloss on here. But I have my water right here, and I'm always dipping it in there, keeping it wet. Now at this point, I might choose to go back with that white again, lighten this up one more time, do a little better fading, depending on what you want. This is the time to do it while it's still relatively wet. I don't like to let it dry here. The more work you can do when the paint is active, the happier I think you're gonna be with the result. I'm gonna go in there and make that really white. Now you'll see why this has gotta be so white later, because it's gonna be my contrast point. And so there's gotta be a reflection of that white too. So just a little bit of white and yellow will make a reflection here in the water. And again, the light areas have to go in first. Now I can make this pretty big. I can go over this later. The light area you can make as big as you want because it's really easy to cover this up with the darker water later on. It's very difficult, unless you have really quality paints, to go back and put light over dark. Sometimes I like to just spread those colors around in other places. This is probably going to be covered up, but just highlights where that sun might hit. Now what am I going to do with my sky? I gotta do something here. The edge of this yellow up here has dried, and so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just bring it back with either a little bit of water and a little bit of paint and reactivate that wet edge that we were talking about. And then I'm going to take a little bit of that red, and again it's wet, and I'm going to mix those together while everything is wet here. And this is the point where you have to decide what kind of, do you want this to be a perfect blend, like a perfect fade? Because you can do it as long as it's wet. Do you want to turn this red into, sometimes the clouds will appear really red on a sunset like this, and you might want to paint in some clouds. You can have some fun with some color now. And I'm mixing, it's not just the pure red. So this red, I should say the red is getting mixed with the yellow. Over here you can see I never use this color right out of the container. I don't like store-bought colors. I like to mix the colors whenever I can, every time. And so just a hint of some clouds in there. Now with that wet edge of red, I want to go to my next color. I want to try and get one more color in up top there. But while I have this little red, I might go in. Just add some little hints of red in there. Next color, I'm going to go with a little violet. So I'll drop a touch of violet in there. And I want this violet to be really dark. Normally you would always add white to the violet. Here I'm going to leave it, we might need a little bit of white in there yet. I'll add a little white to that violet and it'll activate the color. Remember that tip, adding white to your colors to activate the intensity. And I'm going to just do our best to blend those two colors together. So now you can see, here's my sketch and here's where I'm going. I'm constantly cleaning this brush off. It looks like I'm just using one brush. I dip it in the water and I'm just cleaning it off. So I'm always working with a clean brush. So again, I'm mixing at least two colors together, maybe a touch of white in there. You can see I have the red, the violet, and the white all on my paintbrush at the same time. Sky in there. I don't really like that cloud I put in. So the cool thing about acrylic paint is that you could easily just keep going over and over until you're happy with what you have. And in my experience, the more you go over something, the better it's going to look anyway. I'm going to clean that brush, get the purple. So we don't want purple and yellow together. So I just gave my brush a quick clean off, get the purple from up there off. So remember that purple and yellow are across from each other on the color wheel. So they're going to darken each other out and you're going to end up with a really dull color that you probably don't want to have. Oh, I do like that. Okay, I'm going to leave that. So sometimes you try something, or put a little bit of cloud in there. There we go. I like that. You know those wispy clouds that are often breaking up in the evening with the sunset? Red sky at night. Sailor's delight. It's going to be a nice day tomorrow, apparently. And I'm just going in, and I don't really want to come back here, so I'm doing my work now while everything is wet up here. Get those last colors in. So now I've got some visible brush strokes in there. I've got some really nice colors. I would say the sky is done. What you could do at this time is there's not a lot going on down in the lake, so you could come down and you could, while you have these colors on your palette, you could put them in, because the lake is going to reflect what you have in the sky. So I might put in a little, I think I want it to be a little more purpley, a little more violet down at the bottom. Be conscious of this sunset reflection in the water. So you don't want to take away all of this nice light area. What you'll have is you'll have visible ripples in the water. Look at your source image. I'm not making this up as I go. And that broken ripples in the water right there. It's easier to paint the dark around the light. While I have these colors here, I might even continue to darken up some of these. This is just the base coat. Again, most of this will be colored. I'm just practicing stuff. If I don't like it, it's easy to go over it again later. Let's just put a little white highlight in there to remind myself to lighten that up at the top. And so let's start on those back mountains. So I'll show you a little trick here. I'm gonna start with the furthest one back. I'm gonna lighten up. I'm gonna mix a new blue. I'm gonna lighten it up because I want it to be light. The further things are in the back, the more bluey and gray they are. So I'll mix that color up. And then I'm gonna take my brush and dip part of it into the white. So I've kind of got a half and half technique here, or half and half color on the brush. I'm gonna go to the furthest mountain in the back, and I'm gonna just let that light white off the top ride across, and maybe add a little bit more here even. I wanna lighten it up even more. And the key is that you have multiple tones on your brush at the same time. So you end up with a color that is not one shade throughout the whole mountain. I'm gonna do the same thing again, hit this next one up here. Same thing, I've slightly changed the color of my mountain, my hill. Add some more white to it because it's further in the back. Changing the color again, so my third one. So I went from 1 to 2, and now I'm gonna add a little bit of violet in there, maybe a touch more blue. Make my own interesting color up for the next one. Add that little touch more white. And come over the top. So it's the overlapping from our lesson on space and the illusion of depth that you're gonna call on here. And now if you're finding that these two mountains are the same color, I'm gonna just go in and completely change it. Let's get the violet in there. So I just made up that choice on the go. I'm not overly worried about mixing all these colors up. I'm just worried about having different colors in my background. So same thing, I'm gonna hit it over on this other side. Always mixing up new colors. I'm gonna come this way now. And one of my inspirations for this is the group of 7. So the colors are intense, far more interesting than you would find in a photograph unless you start filtering it. I like the contrast between those cool mountains and a kind of a lighter one in the foreground. So again, I'm gonna just mix up a couple different shades, this time with warmer colors. And I'm gonna bring the closest one on that far shoreline. So I've got a series of mountains. Probably should have some trees on these ones. So what you want in that case is a finer brush. So let's say, I'm gonna bring in, there's gonna be one little area of trees right here. And on this, I would have some trees in the background. So there's not gonna be much detail to these. Maybe add a little bit of the blue. And there will be a reflection of that. Reflection of the mountains in here. The last thing you want is the white of your board or your canvas board to be showing through. So it's always good to have bits of reflection in there. I need some more interesting colors, so I'm gonna go back to this teal. I like it, so I'm gonna continue to use it. I got teal and white here now. I'm gonna go back and I like working all over the place. I don't like to spend too much time on one little spot. I like to spread my colors around. So if I'm using that teal in one spot, I'll move it all over the canvas. It'll give a bit of unity, right? By moving it all over the place. So again, I'm gonna actually flip my board around, and I need these to be darker here. So I'll go in. Okay, so I've got some darker rocks in there now. I probably do the reflection in the water at the same time. So I've got some white on here. You could always go in and add little bits of white into the water too if you need to. Now I'll put in a little reflection. Probably hear my dog barking in the background, woofing. He's just saying hello. So again, lots of multicolors, nothing, very rarely do you see one color on anything in my paintings. And I urge you to go ahead and mix your colors as well. It's a lot more fun for you, and it's a lot more enjoyable for your viewer to have some really wild colors in here. If someone wanted something to be, you know, gray rocks or whatever, they'd just go take a picture of it. We have the opportunity to do some really cool stuff here with our colors. I'm gonna hit the top of these rocks one more time. I'm just looking for something that's going to contrast against the water. And now the final piece is the trees. So what you probably should do at this point is let this dry and draw in your trees. So you would go back to your sketch and you're gonna superimpose these trees in. For the sake of time, I'm going to just freehand them in. Let's say I'm using a different brush too, I should state. So I've gone from a flat brush that I would use for the background to a pointy brush for this detail work. So the first thing I like to do is figure out, well, where are these trees on this island going to go? So this is going to be a character tree here. Just coming in with a little bit of bend to it. Each one should be a different height, and there should be a different space between each one. Don't line them up. They're not fence posts, so never line them up, and they should never be the same space or the same height. That doesn't happen in nature unless someone's planting a tree farm, in which case we probably wouldn't be painting there. And even when I'm doing this tree, I'm going to bring in, I plan to bring in some different colors, but I see it's going to need to be really dark to pop out from this background. When you do the branches on the tree, make sure you're looking at your source image, and you'll see that it's not symmetrical, even branches on each side. They're going to be vastly different depending on where those branches are reaching up to the sun. So a quick sketch like this would have been what the group of 7 would have done when they were in Algonquin Park. And they would have had a little board just the same size, but they'd be using oil paints, and they'd be painting right there. This scene would be in front of them. They'd sit down on a rock or a log, and they paint what they see. And they weren't afraid to make some subtle changes. Again, they weren't creating a photograph. even in the early 1900s, they recognized that what they could do with their paint colors is far better than the realistic colors that were there. And sometimes they'd even move a little piece of shoreline or a tree or something to make the composition. So we had the liberty to move these trees, put these trees wherever we really want. I love color. I love the rainbow of colors, and so I'm gonna get them all in here. I'll just put those in. And I didn't clean my brush in between because I want some color from the previous tree to come into this tree. And it's not gonna be just the teal. I'm gonna use a little bit of the violet to make some darker shadowy spots on the underside of the branches here. I'm being conscious of having some negative space in between the branches and focusing on my dark light contrast, mixing different colors in every branch. You can see the purples and blues, teals, everything coming in. You're gonna have all kinds of little issues that you gotta solve, and it's part of the fun. You're a problem solver if you're an artist. And if that paint went on smooth and easy every time, it wouldn't be much of a challenge. We love a good challenge. Just see how I'm jumping around and going back to these rocks here as I find things that need to be fixed. And it's colors that I'm using in my trees, I'm bringing into the rocks just to add a little unity. Get some really cool teals in here. This guy's got to compete for a little bit of emphasis himself, and we'll do that with some teal color. But acrylic, you can just paint right over it if you don't like something. The key is to start light and work dark. That makes it very easy. Have a good plan. You can see I had all my sketches. I looked at all my source images, inspiration artists. I knew what this was going to look like, and I had in front of me kind of a source image the whole time. And so I knew where I was going. Making it up as you go along is not the best solution. At this point, I would probably just go in. I'm going to add in a few maybe lighter areas, slightly lighter areas back on here. I'll just bring back my darks one more time. There we go. And sometimes little smaller brush strokes show that, you know, it's light shimmering off the water. And you can bring that quality back here, differentiate your water from the land. And then sometimes you kind of walk away from this, and then you come back later and you decide, okay, I need to do more. I need a few more trees here on the horizon, for example. Now that it's dry, I can go in and do more detail. Yeah, I like this better now with these little more detail on the trees in the background here. And again, the water is kind of a mirror image, so anywhere there's a taller tree, it's a little darker, you'll have a little darker reflection in the water. I forgot to put those in the foreground, so I'd have to have these trees now. Keep those principles in mind while you're working on your painting today.